Hello, friends. This is Lisa, your host of Unexplained Arkansas, soon to be America, by the way. So I'm very close to making the transition, just name wise. Nothing will change with the channel, but I am super excited. And again, nothing's going to change with how you get the episodes or anything like that. But anyway, so very excited. So little business, you can find me on all the platforms. If you have anything to tell me about this episode or future episodes, feel free to email me at unexplainedarkansas@gmail.com. I will actually keep that email for a while after I transition. I will have a new email as well with a new domain name. So just FYI, you'll have all of my contact information in the show notes. But definitely find Unexplained Arkansas, Unexplained America on, the social medias, on TikTok, Instagram, just everywhere. Facebook group. So I do have 2 Patreon shout outs today. Yay. Shout out to Deidre and Crystal. And big thanks to them and others for joining the Patreon. We do have so many that have joined in the past and are currently with the Patreon. But if you wish to get bonus content that you cannot find anywhere else, go to the Patreon. The link is in the show notes. So yeah. So now today's episode, we're just going to dive in. This is going to be a long episode. I'm not doing a 2-parter. It's just going to be long. So episode is 100% unexplained and definitely 100% sad. Trigger warnings for, there will be a little bit of discussion about suicide, very brief. I'm not going to dive deep. And then, of course, just the normal unexplained stuff. So on January 28, 2008, John Glasgow left his home in Little Rock around 5:15 a.m. and he would never be seen alive again. And really, only John's car would be found in 2008. John's body would not be found until 20. So let's start at the beginning with John. So John was born in Nashville, Arkansas. Yes, there's a Nashville, Arkansas. And it's not the country musical capital that we think of Nashville, Tennessee. John was born October 1st, 1962. He was born to Thomas and Fern Glasgow. And John would be the youngest boy, evidently, of like a family of 8 children. Yes, 8. That's a lot. Fern, his mother, was obviously amazing and very good at having babies. So yeah. And he was born on a farm. From what I can tell, they were a farming family there in Nashville. So Nashville, Arkansas, just to kind of give you guys a little glimmer into that. So it is in the most southern western portion of Arkansas. The town is actually a county seat of Howard County, but the town is small. It only has about 4,400 or so people. So this is not a big town, even though it is a county seat. So the town is home to the world's, and yes, I say world's, largest dinosaur track pathway. And I kind of had to look up what that meant, but it's basically there is a set of 5,000 to 10,000 sauropod footsteps. And this was discovered by a team of archaeologists that came up from like SMU in Dallas. So this is super fascinating. I did not know that about Nashville. I would definitely like to check that out. So John was said to be a very healthy, rambunctious child. He was extremely friendly. He was fun to be around. He was extremely bright. And he would actually graduate as salutatorian of his class at Nashville High School in 1980. So very smart guy, very good in school. And he was said to be very, very outgoing, very friendly, had a lot of friends. So John then went on to attend the University of Central Arkansas, which is located in Conway, Arkansas. And there he would receive a bachelor's in accounting in 1985. And after earning his bachelor's, John went on to study at University of Arkansas at Little Rock. So this is like the main University of Arkansas is in Fayetteville. So this is a division in Little Rock. And here we call it ULR. He did earn his MBA from ULR. So John began working as a CPA or certified public accountant at a firm in Little Rock called Baird, Kurtz, and Dobson. He worked there until 1990. And while working at the Baird firm, so he was actually conducting an audit on the company. I don't know if it was like a third-party requirement of the firm or why they were being audited, but the company being audited was called CDI Contractors. So CDI was so impressed with John and his work that they offered him to come work for them in their accounting department. So by 1992, which he did, and by 1992, John was promoted to controller of the company. And so, I will say during the 80s and his time in college, like there was a marriage. So he did have a first marriage. I really couldn't even find any information about his first wife, and we'll kind of talk about that, but it must have been very brief and he did not have children. So now, fast forward, we're at 1992. So on top of making controller, John did meet and marry, I should say meet back up, but married a woman named Melinda. And evidently, so he had been friends and perhaps more than just friends way back during his time in Nashville where he grew up. So he actually knew Melinda since they were in sixth grade. And they had evidently gone their own separate ways after high school. But then, after they both had married, she had actually had a son with her first, husband, but they reunited and started dating, and they actually got married June 1st of 1992. So that's a perfect time for a wedding, June weddings. So, like I said, Melinda had a son. So now John's life was kind of full circle. He had a great career there at CDI. He had a wife and a stepson. So he had everything going on. And this is 1992. So John's career kept on, going upwards. Like he had a great career. He was controller. And then, so CDI made John their chief financial officer in 1995. So this would have been a big, a big to do. And he would subsequently also, by the time, that he went missing, he would become vice president of the company as well. So to give a little background, so CDI was founded per their website in 1987 for the purpose of building retail facilities for Dillard's Incorporated. And Dillard's is an upscale department store. Now, Dillard's, little background on Dillard's, was founded in 1938 by William T. Dillard, who is now passed, and his son is currently the CEO and, of course, his namesake. So he is also William T. Dillard, but the second. So Dillard's home base is Little Rock. So if you're from Arkansas, you definitely know about Dillard's. But there are, and it's huge. So they have 267 stores, give or take. And Dillard's is in 29 different states. I can honestly say I love Dillard's. It has, quality brands under, one place. So that's kind of nice. I'm not, Elle buys that fast fashion of, the Sheen or whatever, but I want things that are going to last. I do look for quality in my items, and they do have quality pieces. In effect, this is kind of a little side note, but Elle had come to me. She never really, I think we shopped at Dillard's when she was younger. I like their kids department and such, but she had come to me and wanted to go to what they call the Dirty Dillard's. Let me know if you know about this. It's evidently a clearance center for Dillard's in Pine Bluff, and evidently it's getting a lot of I don't know, substance and word of mouth with the teenagers on TikTok. So everybody's talking about going to the quote unquote dirty Dillards. So I definitely want to make a trip to Pine Bluff to do that. So back to CDI. So CDI, when founded, it was founded by William E. He went by Bill Clark, and the Dillards Inc. So, you had Bill Clark is half owner. They were 50-50 owners. So you had Clark and then you had Dillard. So Dillard's, the company. No, we're not talking about Dillard's like the name of the man. It was actually the company, and it's a 50-50 split. So Bill had been the actual president of the company, and he had been a president of a company called Bragg's Electric Construction Company. So Bill had the background for the construction side, obviously, and then he teamed up with Dillard's because Dillard's, they're doing a lot of building. So Bill was the acting CEO and active partner in the company. And again, it's a 50-50 split though. And he was an extremely popular man. He knew a lot of people, had a lot of connections. Looked like, if you Google him, he was very integral in Little Rock. It looked like he was on the board of University of Arkansas. So he had a lot going on. And the company with Bill at the helm really built and worked on a lot more than just Dillard's buildings. The company built the William J. Clinton Presidential Library, the Jackson T. Stevens Spine and Neuroscience Center at UAMS, which is in Little Rock. It built the Dillard's headquarters there in Little Rock. It built the Little Rock Chamber of Commerce, worked on the Emmanuel Baptist Church project, which is huge in Little Rock. And then the University of Arkansas Willard J. Walker Hall, and then the J.B. Hunt Transport Services Center for Academic Excellence. So these were big, huge projects that CDI was involved in. So again, the company was set up to work on, Dillard's projects, but they did a whole lot more. And so this company was popular and was a multi-million-dollar company. So John's acting boss, is Bill. Now, in May of 2007, at the age of 63, which seems super young, so Bill had actually been battling cancer, and he died peacefully at home in May of 2007. Now, Bill's 50% ownership in CDI went to his son, and then also his namesake, William Clark, and it looks like he just goes by William. So William became the CEO in his dad's place. So now you have CDI at this time, just to kind of give you guys some numbers, in 2007 had reported revenue or sales of $432.9 million. Now Dillard's, that same year, they had 7.81 billion. Yes. So CDI was, doing very well. I mean, a multi-million-dollar sales company, but Dillard's was in the billions. So just to kind of give some numbers and some ideas, but these are huge numbers. So after Bill's death, it was discussed if Dillard's would purchase more, of all of the Clark shares of the company. And then Dillard's discussed that the CDI employees would have an option to purchase shares. So at first it was kind of like, okay, Dillard's, are you going to buy out, my dad's shares and what's going to me? Like, this is speaking from the Clark side. But no, evidently Dillard's was like, well, let's just see about doing a purchase option of, more partners instead of, us just taking it. So one of the people involved in taking, an interest in the company was the CFO, which is John Glasgow. So he was looking at buying into CDI. Okay. So now, from what I understood from different articles and such, I couldn't tell for sure if they were wanting to break the company down. Right now it's in two parts. I couldn't tell if they were wanting to break it down in three parts to have Clark, Glasgow, and Dillard's be, partners, 33.3 whatever percent partners. But it also I found something that said that they were fifthing it. So it was like, but I think that Dillard's was going to have 3/5. Clark maybe keep 1/5 and Glasgow have 1/5. So it was confusing. Couldn't really tell exactly what was happening there, what the plan was. But basically the big to do is, okay, Bill has passed away and we're going to restructure the company. So no matter what, the company was going to be restructured with, buy-ins or buyouts happening. So again, Now, Dillard's, being 50% owner, obviously had a lot of say in all this. And evidently, they asked for a forensic audit to happen before any decisions on buy-ins or buyouts or any changes, because they just wanted to ensure all the financials were clean, so to speak. And I would think that that's very normal. I would think that, I mean, we're talking a multi-million-dollar company, and a company like Dillard's who deals in the billions. They're going to be, I would think, making sure that everything's good. So John, being the CFO, was like the go-to person on all of this, okay? Like, he was the man having to work on the plus. He was one of the buy-ins. So on Dillard's side of things, their CFO at the time and an executive vice president, his name was James Freeman. So Freeman was also intricate in all of this. He would be, as the CFO of Dillard's, that was his job to make sure of all the good money and all that. So he was managing and maneuvering the audit. So, and it was evidently like his doing. The audit was his doing, from what I could tell. So for John, the audit was extremely stressful. He would tell his wife Melinda and his older brother Roger all about this, and he stated that the audit was, stressful because it was pulling him away from like his normal duties as CFO. The auditors were repeatedly asking, the same questions of him over and over again. They kept asking for the same papers over and over again. So it was just a lot on his plate to deal with. And of course, it was, it's an important thing. It's a big deal. So it was something that was taking up a lot of his time, but it was a stressful deal. So by December, so now we're at December of 2007. Remember, Bill had passed in 2007 in May. So Melinda could tell John was exhausted. And evidently, John was a pretty high energy person. Like, he, just keep that in mind, okay? Just very high energy. So in fact, the family, in December, I couldn't tell exactly when this trip happened, but in December, they went on a ski trip, and Roger kind of commented on how he noticed John was different. He just seemed a little bit skinnier, like he had lost some weight, and he was just not his normal self. Like, he could tell that something was up. When he asked John about it, John mentioned the problems, with the audit, and that Dillard's was unhappy about the way that CDI, thus John, was handling its accounting. Like, they were just questioning the how and why. And John commented that the way Dillard's handled their accounting was, quote unquote, screwing themselves. So basically, they had a very different idea of accounting practices. So Roger gave John like a little pep talk, and he said, John, kind of by the time that they were landing to go ski and got started with the vacation, like, John appeared to be in really good spirits and really enjoyed the vacation. And really, Roger would say about John is that he loved to travel. And that was something, they had gone to the Galapagos Islands, and this was something in articles and such. But John loved to travel, and he really, at this point in the situation in his life, he really needed this vacation. Like, he, was going through this really stressful time. So just to outline for you guys, like, I kind of get into all this from my banking background, but because I'm really, I don't know. I'm still I don't know. I guess I'll always like financials, or I don't know. Anywho, so there are two primary and different accounting methods. And I have no idea which one CDI was utilizing or which one Dillard's was utilizing, or, what the disagreement is. But typically, the two different ones are a cash basis and then an accrual basis accounting. So two different accounting. And then even if you do an accrual basis, there's still like a modified accrual basis. So there are different, routes companies can take or people can take. And typically a cash basis accounting method is like what individuals would use for like your household accounting. But businesses tended to use accrual. Now, again, nothing was clear about which one CDI was utilizing, but it was said that Dillard's did not like the way that CDI accounting was set up, and because it wasn't what they do, and there was mention about depreciating assets. So some of those things were mentioned in articles. Now, when you Google, there's like 4 different ways to depreciate assets. And again, like I said, you've got the 2 different accounting methods. And even when you're talking about an accrual basis accounting, which is what normal companies utilize, like there are still different modifications on those. So each individual company definitely would have, the way that they just do their books, the way that they do it. So yeah, so it's up in the air. Again, I don't know for sure which way, CDI was doing things, but evidently, however they were doing things, Dillard's wasn't liking. And I will say this, so CDI, they're a big company, but they're in the $1 million sales. And Dillard's is in the $1 billion sales. So when you're talking about scrutiny on the companies, a company like Dillard's is going to get a lot more scrutiny than CDI. So that's another factor. You're not going to have the same, scrutiny. It's just 2 different situations. So I will say, I'm not sure what, was going on, but James was being very direct with John. So this is James Freeman, and telling John that he didn't like it. Like he was being very pointed about how he did not like the way CDI was doing their accounting. James also told John that he felt like CDI had overbilled Dillard's on some work. So bottom line, things were heated. And from what was said, evidently James Freeman was a very direct, aggressive person, that this wasn't out of the ordinary for him to be very direct with John, and evidently very aggressive. So just FYI. So things were getting heated. So evidently a few weeks before John would go missing, he stated that James had called him, at his office, and said some very nasty things to him, like that questioned John's integrity. Like John was relaying this information to, his boss, William Clark, and then Melinda and his family, his brother, So he mentioned that, James had said when companies get in trouble, it's the CFO that will face jail time. Like evidently Freeman was saying this to John. And Freeman even brought up to John about the CFO of Enron at that time, and that, the same thing could happen to John if he was found to be cheating, Dillard's and such. So this conversation, of course, this is allegedly, between the 2 men, and from, John's point of view and what he's going to tell people. So this is what was being said. This shook John to the core. John was said to be impeccably clean in his work and his accounting work. He was said to be honest and professional, like honest to the core, and would never do anything unprofessional or unethical. In fact, John had been promoted from controller to CFO at CDI because he had found that the current CFO at that time had embezzled about $3 million from the company. And this was, something that I found in articles. So John had a reputation of being very honest. And so these allegations from James Freeman shook John. Like he was very upset. Super upset. So obviously, as soon as this even happened, like John went to talk to his boss, William Clark. They immediately call an emergency meeting with all parties, like with Dillard's, everybody. In the meeting, evidently Freeman denied saying those things to John. However, he still expressed that he felt CDI had overbilled Dillard's. So he was still directly saying, hey, there's something going on here and we've been overbilled. So to that, William said, even if, CDI had overbilled you all, which we do not believe that happened, that would not have anything to do with John. He would have zero knowledge as such. he definitely wouldn't be culpable of such. And as far as the way of the accounting method, John followed the accounting method that was set up for the company from the very beginning, like in 1987, evidently. So William definitely went to that and stood behind John. And John likewise, after that happened with James, like John went home and told Melinda all about it. And he told her what was said. He told her about, his integrity being questioned. And Melinda said he literally was so upset that he cried. He was not a crier. She had only seen him cry one time before when his mother passed away. So she kind of knew that this whole thing was just breaking him apart. Like it was just, I'm sure the stress, and she had said he was tired. Like this was not cool. And he had told her that day that happened was the worst day of his life. So whatever was going on between him and James Freeman was not fun for him. I mean, it was obviously devastating to him as a professional and as a person. Like he was stressed. So John, feeling threatened and such, decided in an effort to protect himself, he began recording all of his phone calls. Because again, this was in phone call, it wasn't in writing. He didn't have any evidence of this. And then, Freeman denied the conversation and such. So in his last few weeks at work, he was recording his conversations. He also was so upset and distraught and just hurt over the whole thing that he did compose a letter on behalf of the company coming from, William Clark as CEO, made out to the CEO of Dillard's, which would be the William T. Dillard II. He composed the letter just basically saying, how James Freeman had come down there and, said that CDI was dishonest, and for you, being Dillard's and the CEO of Dillard's, to sit back and not say anything hurt us to the core. We have never been so offended in our lives. And this letter is just a portion that I just read to you. It was drafted January 25th. But William Clark did which was on a Friday. So, William just asked John to sit on the letter. Like John was thinking that he would kind of hand deliver the letter. But, William Clark was like, hey, let's just sit on this. I'm sure he's thinking over the weekend, like, let's just, how it is. You're upset and you compose something. And just in the composing sometimes of the letter, that makes you feel better. That in itself, I'm sure we've all been there. So, and we've all been on the side of William Clark. Of course, he's CEO of a company. This is a partnership that goes back to 1987. So they're all wanting to keep things civil. Okay. But obviously there's beef. There is just huge beef. So this letter composed was never actually sent to Dillard's, just FYI. So that all happened again on Friday, January 25th. And now on the Saturday, the 26th, Melinda stated that John went into work. So he was working a lot of overtime. He worked all day and then came home and he was exhausted. And Melinda said that night he just kind of curled up in his favorite chair in their living room with his cat, Simon. Evidently he had a cat. He really loved his cat. So they were, he was just chilling. He was exhausted. He had worked all day, putting together just his normal CFO duties. Like evidently he had worked on the interest for that quarter or whatever. He had other duties other than this whole buy-in, buy-out audit stuff. So he was having to work, the weekends to catch up and do his normal job. So on the 26th, he did that. So now on Sunday, the 27th, John was going again into the office to work some more. So he did come home for lunch. So he went in that morning. He came home for lunch. After he ate, Melinda noticed that John lay down on the couch to kind of nap. And again, John was not a napper. He was pretty high energy type of person, but all of this lately had really taken its toll on him. And she told him that he should just stay home, and relax. But evidently, I think she had gone to play tennis that afternoon, and he did end up going back to the office for a little bit. And at some point, even William Clark had seen him working either Saturday or Sunday and had commented on, everything seemed fine with John. Like he was working, doing his normal work, okay, normal extra work that he's having to do at this time. So Sunday night, John and Melinda did walk across the street to one of John's cousins' houses that lived right across the street from them to have dinner. And that night, John seemed like he was in a great mood. They enjoyed, the evening of spending time with the family and eating and just visiting. So he seemed very normal, very good spirits, all of that. And this is Sunday, okay? So after they get home, John did get back in his armchair with his cat and he fell asleep there. And so Melinda thought about waking him up. It was about 10:30 when she went to bed, and she's like, I'm just going to leave him. He's tired. It's been a, long week, long weekend. So, and tomorrow's Monday. I'm sure she's like, I'm just going to let him sleep and come to bed when, he wants to. Well, that would be the last time that Melinda would ever see John, is asleep in his armchair. So the next morning, January 28th, Melinda wakes up. John is already gone, and that wasn't totally abnormal, situation. John did typically go into the office early. It was a Monday morning. Melinda didn't find that abnormal. So she goes on about her day. She goes to work. She's evidently at a lunch thing, and she gets a call at 2:30 p.m., and this is Monday the 28th, and she, gets a call from CDI telling her that John never came in that morning. And Melinda was immediately shocked, like immediately. This was not normal. Him being gone that morning was normal, but him not showing up to work was not normal. She said John was always at work. Like he never missed. He never not called. Like that immediately was weird. Melinda immediately rushes home to see if John is there. She begins calling John's cell phone. It goes to voicemail. He's not answering. He's not home. So Melinda calls John's brother, Roger. And Roger is an attorney. He works there in Little Rock, and he's very close to them. So he comes out and he's helping Melinda. So, and they had, like I mentioned, they had just gone on their ski trip. And then they had also done a trip to the Galapagos Islands there within that time frame. So again, he's just very close with John. So Roger and Melinda begin calling around all the friends, all the family, everywhere they could think of. They look around the house as well to see if anything is out of the ordinary. They don't notice anything out of the ordinary. They do find where John had written their joint checking account number and the combination to their home safe on a pad that was Melinda. It was like Melinda's pad, but it was his handwriting written down. Now, these two items were things Melinda knows. Like it's a joint checking account. She knows the number. She knows the combination to the safe. So she thought that was super odd. And then that pad is left under their phone. So it's just right there, probably in the kitchen or whatever, where they do their business. So he had also that morning written out some checks. So he was the trustee of their family educational account. So he had written a check out to school, like college, for one of John's nieces. He had also written out his check to himself for his trustee's fee for doing such. So these checks were dated that morning and were now ready to mail. So he had done a bit of, personal work there. So Melinda opened the safe up even just to kind of look around. She did note nothing unusual, like their passports were in the safe and all the normal documents that they kept there, but she did know that there was $11,000 in cash in the safe, which was more than what she thought they usually kept in the safe. And I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, Melinda probably didn't keep up with that. John was probably, I know typically in a household, one person handles kind of the finances. I have always handled my household stuff. I tell Daryl stuff all the time, and he does some things, like he can view a lot of our stuff, but I'm kind of the handler. So it being a CFO and being that type, I can imagine that John was the handler. So she may not have even known that money was in there, and she didn't say like how much they quote unquote usually keep in there. I don't know if it's 5,000 or 6,000, but she did say 11,000 seemed to be higher than the normal for them. So another source I found mentioned that Melinda stated that John had a .22 rifle that was missing. Now, Roger stated that the gun was really just an old family heirloom and he didn't think it was missing, but he thought that John had actually given it to someone else in the family. So he didn't think anything of that. There's no mention again of this, and this was just like in a little blip article or something. So again, the .22 rifle is missing. So Roger and Melinda do connect with their neighbor, Melinda and John's neighbor, and the neighbor said that he saw John's Volvo. He drove a dark gray Volvo SUV 2005 was the year model. The neighbor said that it was unusually early for John to be out because he saw the vehicle leaving their driveway or whatever at 5:15 in the morning. So John did leave, in the mornings, but he didn't leave at 5:15. He may have leave more like 6:15, 7:15. I don't know what time he goes in the office, 8 o'clock or whatever, but he left at 5:15, or at least the neighbor remembers seeing the car, but the neighbor couldn't be sure who was driving the car. It's not like he actually physically saw John. He just assumed it's John. It's coming from John's house. It's John's car. It's a Monday morning, that kind of thing. So there you are. Now, by 6 p.m., Melinda calls the Little Rock Police Department to report John missing. They're still, they have no word of John. They just know that he left out at 5:15. So one of the first thing they did was start to track John's phone. And his cell phone is owned and issued by the company. So it was a CDI Contractor's own, cell phone. So William Clark has his phone tracked, and they do find that there was a ping off of a tower in Conway County at there was one final ping, and it was about 7:22 that morning or so. Now, Conway County is around 60 miles to the northwest of Little Rock, okay? Just to kind of give you guys some reference. So based on the ping, the police were able to narrow down to a spot really along the Arkansas River. So on Tuesday, in Conway County, on Tuesday the 29th, Roger and one of his friends, desperate to do something, I'm sure, desperate to find John and try to figure this out. So they drove to the spot looking for any signs of John, because this ping, they were able to kind of narrow down, somewhat, vicinity of, John's vehicle or John's cell phone at least. So they didn't see anything. And Roger mentioned he felt like John if he was in that area, he would actually be hiking at what's called a state park located there in Conway County called Petit Jean State Park. So John had been there before. He had hiked Petit Jean before. He liked the park. So Roger just felt like he wouldn't be down here in this area that they had been directed to, that he would probably be in the park, which, he just didn't think he would be down by the river. So a few hours later, Roger receives a call that the police had found John's vehicle, but John wasn't in it. So the car was found parked in front of a place inside the Petit Jean State Park called Mather Lodge. So Petit Jean State Park is a 3,400-acre state park, and this Mather Lodge is kind of like the centerpiece of the park. So, people can stay in the lodge. There is a restaurant there. There are hiking trails, bathrooms, visitor center. It's kind of like, it's just the hub of, if you're going to that park, you're kind of, Mather Lodge is just the center there. I personally have hiked Petit Jean. I think we did that last year, Daryl and Elle and one of Elle's friends, and we parked at Mather Lodge, and I remember thinking, this is gorgeous. I could even stay. I'm not a camper, but I could stay at this lodge. But it's just a gorgeous place, and it has a whole setup. So if you're driving there and going to hike, it's a perfect place to start, a jumping off point. So the Conway County Sheriff's Office is obviously called in on this. They're working this. So they have John's vehicle. It is unlocked. This is very odd for John to not lock his car. Inside, he has his computer bag that has his CDI owned items in it. Like they're all together. It's his laptop, his cell phone, his corporate credit card that CDI issued, his keys for the company. Like everything is all together in this bag. Like his personal credit card and everything. Like his personal credit card is in his glove box. So it's aside from this. But again, everything is just left open. And again, the family, Melinda's like, this is not normal. And from what she can see, it's almost like, she felt like he had put all those items together, kind of like, you know what? I'm done with you kind of thing. Like that is at least what she conveyed in interviews about how his CDI items were all left together the way that was. So they do check to see if John is registered at the lodge. That's the natural step. Okay, John's car is here. He's here. And so they look to see if he's registered. He is not. They're combing everything they can. They do find a tourist that was at the lodge on the 28th, so the day before. And the tourist had been taking pictures. They had taken a picture of the parking lot and the lodge itself because his car was parked right in front of the lodge. So the picture was taken around 4:30 p.m. on the 28th, and it did show John's SUV was parked there at that time. So this is, we're talking a day later, 24 hours later, that the car they knew of being there. So the first question on everybody's mind is, it takes about an hour and 15 minutes to get from John's house in Little Rock to Mather Lodge. Now that is driving the direct route. Of course, his phone pinged there in Conway County is 7:22. So there is some buffer time. Like, what did he do? Did he, was he meeting someone? Did he go somewhere else? Did he have breakfast somewhere? We don't know. We don't know what he did. Now that they have John's car, but not John, obviously a huge search begins. This is Friday the 4th. We are in day 3 of severe weather, and it's just weird. But this is January, it's January 28th, 29th. Arkansas winter weather is weird. And in Conway County at that time in 2008, so the weather was severe. So you had some cold and hot air mixing. There were even tornadoes on that day. Like it was bad weather. There was high winds, lots of rain, winds going on. So it was making the search difficult. But the sheriff's office did call in the park's search and rescue team. They also get assistance from the Arkansas State Police. So they've got the sheriff, they've got the parks department. They're doing everything that they can to get this search. And they are utilizing dogs as well. But the dogs are having issues because of the weather. And I have a lot of opinions on dogs. But anyway, in their use, which we'll get into. So there's obviously a multitude of events happening at the same time as well. So Melinda, is called and told about all this. All the families called and told about this. So the family come into the park. Of course, they immediately go into the park, and I'm sure they're wanting to assist with the search and just all this stuff going on. So the park and rescue, they're searching. Again, they're using dogs, and they call on the help of a man named George Stowe Rains, who was evidently known and said to be the best tracker in Arkansas. At this time, they all feel they're looking for an injured John. They don't know how or why he's injured, but that's kind of the thought. Like he's here in the park and he's injured and we need to rescue him. So likewise, they're looking at John's vehicle. And the state police do impound John's car, and they do not find any fingerprints. Now, this is unclear. Does it mean that they don't find any useful prints, or does it look like the car is quite clean? Like, that was not detailed, but they definitely did not find any fingerprints. And in fact, they did not find any of John's fingerprints either. So again, the question is, was this like a clean wipe, or just not useful prints, like partial print, smudge print, whatever? So that's a question. The search, of course, was a huge endeavor. The state said that the amount spent on the search, like the amount of time, was over 200 hours of searching, and it spanned 5 days. Like some places said 3 days, some places said 5, but 5 total days of searching and 0 signs of John. And of course, Melinda is beside herself. The family is beside themselves. She stated he would not have left her. Like, they were extremely close, and she's alarmed. This is not normal. This is not, something that John would do. So Roger and Melinda, feel something is very wrong. They feel like there is definitely misconduct involved somehow. Now, they know John was under stress, but they also know that he was very committed to CDI and Melinda. So all of this made 0 sense. Like, he was just, again, he's a CFO. And not to say that obviously all of CFO people are honest. Obviously, the one before him wasn't, and people, I don't know, people can get sideways in things, or, caught up in something. But typically, and he sounds very like the typical accounting person, and I know so many, and I'm thinking of them in my head when I'm, they do the same thing every day. They wake up, they go to work, they just are very reliable people because they're very methodical people. So, I will say my Daryl is like that. He's just like, he's not even an accounting person, but he's just a numbers person. And so he's just very methodical and reliable, He, you know where he is. So now, with the search called off, the family actually, they continue to stay around and conduct their own searches and do their own thing. So they are there in the park for a full 2 weeks. And by the end of the 2 weeks, Melinda recalls later that on the very last night, they do hold a candlelight vigil for John, and about 70 friends and family are there. And they're just praying for answers. They're praying for John. They're just in prayer over this. So Melinda does print thousands of flyers. They pass them out all over Little Rock, Conway County. The authorities are chasing down leads. John's phone records, his computer, all of the, he had the recordings in his office. All of these things are being investigated or being dived into. And of course, there's still that audit going on, between the Dillards and the CDI. So, of course, the other thing going on, and this is, I'm from Searcy. I know how Searcy is. We're like 24,000 people, and, everybody knows everybody else's business. Well, from what I understand of Little Rock, it is very like that, very close-knit. Everybody knows each other. These people would have been very well known, have lived in the community for a long time. The Clark, and of course the Dillards, and the rumor mill is going crazy. And you can imagine the talk. This is a CFO of a very, successful company affiliated with Dillard's has gone missing. And, of course, the press is putting out, they're putting out stuff. So people are finding out that this has happened amongst a very stressful audit going on. So everyone is speculating there is a huge connection between this audit and John being missing. So, and again, what else are they going to think? So Roger Glasgow, in an interview actually in March of 2008, so only a short time, after John is missing, he does state, and this is in an interview, there have been no solid information developed concerning his, being John's, disappearance. Why, where, or how, since his vehicle was found at a state park in Arkansas 6 weeks ago. Law enforcement, along with the Glasgow family, have continued to actively investigate a number of leads that have been uncovered since then, but without any definitive explanation so far. We will continue with this effort. So this was released by Roger, and Roger's, I'm sure taking charge of everything. I'm sure Melinda is just beside herself. And Roger, he is an attorney, he is a professional, and so he's really kind of conducting as spokesperson for the family. So again, the media is reporting. They're in a frenzy about this. They're reporting daily on John's disappearance. Stories are running all over Arkansas, but also it's getting some national, pull. This is kind of a national item. So there is a story that runs in the Arkansas Business Journal about the relationship between management of CDI and Dillard's being seriously strained shortly before John's disappearance. So again, everybody's, trying to connect dots, trying to make sense of this. And this is what, people are pointing at. And I will say, CDI and Dillard's as corporations, what corporations want to do. They don't want things to be, not good. That's not good for business. So CDI and Dillard's jointly issue a statement to the media stating neither Dillard's nor CDI believe any money was misappropriated by John Glasgow or any other member of CDI's management. After being questioned about such and the obvious, and this is, obviously there are rumors, that's why they issued out this statement, and obviously the rumors that were being spread around were involving John. And typically when a CFO goes missing amidst an audit, this is where people's minds go. So they were trying to, in their joint statement, they were trying to alleviate that rumor that John had done anything, untowards. Like, they were just trying to dispel that. And that, A, is nice and accurate. Like, he had not done anything, there was nothing legally going on that would state that he was in any type of trouble. Now that's said, now there, must have been some, in people's minds, they're thinking there's got to be more. And again, that's why they're rumoring. But CDI and the Glasgow family, they knew John, and they knew how honest and ethical and moral he was. And he was very diligent. And I will say, he and Melinda, they were good financially. They had, nice, vehicles. They had a nice house, but they were all paid for. John had actually just received and deposited a $300,000 kind of year of end bonus after CDI had had one of its best years, which was in 2007. So the newspapers also reported, they did an article on how John had zero reason to run away, because I'm sure other people are thinking, okay, well, he's run away to start a new life or whatever, but, he had, this newspaper article pointed out, he had a 6-figure job. He had a buy-in happening for a multi-million-dollar company. He had a very happy home life. Like, why would he walk away from such? Like, that made no sense. And that was also reported. So why, But the questions are, remaining are, where is John? Like, where is he? Like, obviously, he's not home. His car, is left unlocked with him not in it. Where is he? So Melinda would further state to media that in the wake of John's disappearance, all of his records and finances were audited and all of it came up clean. Even the auditors evidently working on the Dillard's Clark buy-in were impressed with how clean John kept everything. So that's what was said and conveyed to her. So obvious questions are, like, did John take his own life? Was he abducted? Or did he leave and start a new life? Like, what happened? Like, where is he? So for John's family during this time, the only answer that made sense to them was abduction and foul play. They did not conceive him leaving on his own accord. and starting a new life. That didn't make sense to him. Like, he didn't have his passport, he didn't have money, he didn't move any money around. You just didn't see anything that would be indicative of starting a new life. Like, yeah. And I don't know, there have been people, there was even a situation in Cersei where a man, I guess he was having financial problems. I'm not going to get too deep into it. And he made it look like he died, but he didn't. He surfaced anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very hard to just walk away and start a new life. Like, people do it, I'm sure, but it's very difficult, and they do surface. So, something happens. So, big question then. So, of course, the Glasgows are thinking someone's abducted John, someone's foul play on John. So, was John being blackmailed? Roger Glasgow, in an interview, stated that a scenario you could dream up. We're not suggesting any of this is correct because we just don't know, but it opens up a whole Pandora's box of possibilities, like in regards to, was John being blackmailed? That's the question. So now a couple of leads do pop up in the way of witnesses stating they saw John. So based on newspapers, these witnesses came forward really shortly, like within weeks or days of John being missing. It's not exactly clear when, but one was a worker in a Waffle House located in Russellville. They said that they thought a man by John's description came in during that time frame and ordered eggs on medium. I think he ordered other things. But additionally, another witness, an attendant that worked for a gas station in the same area, like Russellville area, they also mentioned seeing John. Now, authorities did take the information. They did try to pinpoint down these eyewitnesses to see if they're accurate or whatever, and they also, so another thing that happened, a search team out of Maine, like the state, had heard of John being missing. So again, this story was national and connected with Roger to come in and utilize their dogs to search. Like, evidently they had a dog team that were able to pick up cold trails, like people that had gone missing, weeks or months in the past, that they could pick up a trail. So Melinda and Roger do pay for this team to come down from Maine, and they let the dogs smell some of John's clothes that he had worn, last worn, and then they took the dogs to places that they knew John might have been, like the Mather Lodge. But they also took the dogs to that Waffle House in Russellville. Okay, so yeah, so they took the dogs there. Now, to be clear, the authorities focused, of course, on the route from Little Rock to Mather Lodge. In fact, all the possible routes from Little Rock to Mather Lodge, and specifically that would have any type of video surveillance. So, I mean, this is 2008. Not everybody's got the Ring doorbells, and now we have so many wireless cameras. So a lot more people and a lot more places do have surveillance now. But in 2008, not so much. I mean, you would have been definitely gas stations, banks, that kind of thing. So they did look at that. And they did not, and they looked at all the footage that they could, and they never saw John's Volvo. Now, in Russellville, and I will say this, so Russellville is about 26 miles past Mather Lodge, not along the route from Little Rock to Mather Lodge. Okay, so it's not in the route. And from what I could see, they did, the eyewitness at the gas station, they're checking that footage. They didn't find anything. The path to Russellville is not along the route. So if John truly drove to Russellville, to that Waffle House, it would be driving an extra 50 miles. So past his location and then back to Mather Lodge. So even taking a so-called different path from Little Rock still would not put John in Russellville. Like, it is, again, it's 27 miles past in the other direction. So now the Maine dogs brought in allegedly hit John's scent in a gas station. And again, no no actual footage, video footage, surveillance was there to support this. It was just these dogs. And then the dog, and I hate to say these dogs, but I just have an opinion on this. And then the dogs took the scent from the Waffle House, evidently. They picked up the scent at the Waffle House, and the scent took them to a room 211 at a Comfort Inn, which was by the Waffle House. So the authorities, they do check all of this out, and nothing comes up to tie John to the Waffle House, legitimately, or a Comfort Inn, or this gas station. So Roger himself states that he doesn't believe there's any type of credibility with the eyewitnesses or the leads. Now, I will say, in my opinion, looking at other cases that I've researched, like, I don't have much faith in dogs. Like, even when we're talking cadaver dogs, you've seen just so many cases where, yes, some dogs can pick up a scent and it'll take them to a body, like in the Gilgo Beach situation. But then in other situations, there was like that, Lost Daughter Netflix documentary where they do, the family believes that the daughter was dumped on this land that this, the suspect of the crime owns, and they take cadaver dogs and nothing is produced. And again, they even try like the, ground penetrating radar, and that wasn't useful. So I do think that the dogs are like polygraphs. They're a tool, but not super accurate. So, I mean, it's just not going to be 100% foolproof or even 70% foolproof. It's just not. And don't even get me started on eyewitnesses. So every time someone goes missing in all these cases, there's always people that pop up and say, they saw the person here, whatever. So they come forward and say they saw them here or there. And in other cases, they're just proven wrong. And statistically, even an eyewitness, used in a case, is inaccurate about 70% of the time. And we've kind of talked about, like, your mind and your memory it's just tough. And we've discussed it. How many times have we seen an eyewitness account of a suspect, and then you find out, who actually did it, and you look at the difference? Like on the Delphi case, they came up with, a description, and, yeah, they're very different. They are very different than the actual person. And then even when they came up with like Ted Bundy, there were a lot of different descriptions of him and drawings made of him. And yeah, I mean, once you saw the person, like, oh, okay, yeah, we're just not, as humans, we're just not credible. There's just a lot of different things that go into our memory. Like our mind, I think, is processing so many things at once. So, and I really do think our truths are relative. So, you and me, like two people can be in a room and witness something and have two very different accounts because we're two different people. So I think that just plays a lot into it. And that's why I don't put too much credit into eyewitness accounts or dogs or ground penetrating. Polygraphs, no, sorry. um, DNA and video surveillance, yes. Cell phone pings, yes. Like those, those type of things. So again, eyewitness accounts to me are only good with a lot of backed up information to account for it, or a plethora of eyewitnesses actually on the same page. So bottom line, these leads went nowhere. And so after a year and there was no sign of John, the Glasgow family really felt like John was gone and not coming back. Like they really lost hope that John was alive. So to backtrack a little, what happened to CDI with John gone? So William Clark was essentially left, with little options. He is the CEO, he owns 50%, and evidently the accounting team from Dillard's actually began running the office in John's absence as CFO. So by August 2008, so of course John goes missing in January. By August 2008, Dillard's, buys out the remaining 50% interest from Clark. Little side note, William Clark opens up his own contracting firm upon leaving CDI. It is called Clark Contractors and is quite popular in the Central Arkansas, contracting business. And to this day, William Clark runs that company as, CEO. I don't know if he has any partners, with him. I don't think he does, but that you can find all of that online. So essentially, this completely breaks up the relationship for good. So Dillard's brings in a man named Mark Beach in 2009. So they fully buy the company in August of 2008. By 2009, Mark Beach comes in to be the company's COO. So Mark was officially made president and CEO like in 22. So he had been there for quite a while, and then now he is the CEO. A man named Chris Johnson is currently the CFO for Dillard's and CDI. So both. So now, literally on the CDI website, written themselves, it states that, verbatim, Mark Beach came in 2009 and quote unquote restructured the company's accounting practices. Again, verbatim. I don't know about you, but this is very pointed. Clearly a beef, if I ever saw one, and I would say this is almost passive aggressive. This was pointed. They put that out for a reason. Now, was the reason because they just wanted their people, they're a corporation. They've got people, that want to, you want to have full faith if you're going to be spending millions of dollars with these contractors. These contractors are huge. Like, just even think about building a house. And, some people, when they get a contractor, I've heard horror stories. And of course, I was a mortgage lender. I was involved in situations where that's not fun. And sometimes contractors, A, don't appropriate funds the proper way, and B, they just don't do a good job. So it's important that you have faith in them. So even though CDI and Dillard had issued out remember they issued out that joint statement in March about the audit and not finding anything amiss, Dillard's went on to issue out a statement to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and I believe this was by April of 2008, that they revised some financials due to an overbilling of $7 million by CDI in 2007. Now, CDI issued out a rebuttal to that said that this didn't happen and that the error of computing was on the Dillard side. So, he said, she said was going on, or they said, whatever. This was a beef. This is a big beef, and this is a lot of money. So if you go back and look at financial announcements, so you can go back and Google, Dillard's itself stated that in 2007 was a challenging year for the company. Like, they didn't have a good year. It was challenging for them. However, it had been a great year for CDI. Remember the $3,000 bonus John received, which actually I believe James, Freeman had commented that wasn't right. So, Dillard's owned 50% of CDI. 50% of those earnings go straight to Dillard's. But I guess Dillard's didn't like that the other 50% went to the Clark family, and obviously salaries and bonuses to the CDI management. So again, I'm just following the money here. And there was beef. There was clearly beef with these two, companies, and they split ties. So as of 2008, they are no longer together. The company is fully owned by Dillard's. Now, to all accounts, the Arkansas State Police would have looked at everyone in John's life. They naturally would look at all the people at CDI, but also all the people in Dillard's. They would have, looked at everybody, looked at the financials, looked at the leads. So they found zero leads on anyone in John's life. Like nothing to go on, no further investigating on that, or nothing being produced from investigations. And I'm sure, just like me, they're following the money. So in the meantime, Melinda is left with no John. John's family is just left to wonder. They're worried. They're trying to hold on to faith that something, will happen that will let them know what happened to John, their husband, brother, stepdad, cat dad, friend, coworker. He's just gone. So by March of 2011, after 3 full years of zero signs or hints on John's whereabouts, Melinda files a petition with the courts for John to be deemed legally dead. And as painful as that is, there's also, just think about it in your life or your finances. If someone goes missing and they're a homeowner, it's not like it's one thing if it's a horrible thing for any account, but, financially even, you've got financial responsibilities, you've got paperwork. And so having someone that, is not clearly alive and you don't know if they're dead, you don't know if they're alive, that's a problem for ownership reasons, financial reasons, whatever. So this is why, she had to do this. So on April 13th, 2011, the judge signs off on the petition. So this is John's official death date. And this is what is actually on his tombstone. And he is buried in Nashville, where he was born. So little less than a year after this, the Glasgow family gets some news. However, definitely doesn't end up the way they would hope. And yeah, it ends up being a lot crazy, okay? So January 2012, the Little Rock Police Department is contacted by officials in Faulkner County. And Faulkner County is kind of close to Conway County there, where John went missing. Faulkner County is home to Conway, the city, which is also where John went to, he went to college there at the University of Central Arkansas. So to kind of connect those dots. But a man named Jonathan Bronner, and he goes by John, so this is confusing. You got John and John. So Bronner is a 43-year-old convicted felon who is currently waiting trial for his newest crime of stalking his ex-wife. And we're talking newest crime. So hold on to your little hats because, again, this is crazy and this gets a little convoluted. So, because Bronner is an interesting guy, to say the least. So, Bronner has already been in prison already. In fact, he was on parole, but he was in prison. So, in 2009, Bronner hired 2 men, one named Kirkman and Chapman, to go kidnap, that was their last names, to go kidnap a man named Jim Davin, who Bronner had worked for. So, Bronner and Jim were commodities brokers, and Bronner wanted Jim kidnapped so that Jim would then be, I guess, blackmailed into transferring $3 million to some offshore accounts Bronner had set up for himself. So Jim had actually just fired Bronner for stealing from the company, But Jim had taken John in when no one else had. So Jim, David, had actually hired Bronner as a broker when no other firm would, because he had kind of gotten in trouble before. And now Bronner, repays Jim in this kindness of stealing from him and now hiring these goons to kidnap him, abduct him. Yeah. So Bronner is upset with Jim for just firing him, but Bronner is, a piece of crap. So long story short, the people, so David Kirkman and Jeffrey Chapman, they're hired by Bronner to go to Jim's house and get him. Well, the abduction doesn't go great. It does not. So Newkirk and Chapman go to get Jim. They go to abduct him, but Jim fights them. And then Jim's son, who's at the house at that time, his name is Tom, he ends up getting a gun and firing on Newkirk and Chapman to help his father, because his father is literally being abducted before his eyes. So Tom ends up shooting and killing Chapman. Okay? So Bronner and Newkirk end up going to prison for this whole attempted kidnapping situation and all of the above. And Bronner literally only serves like 1 year in some type of boot camp situation before being paroled, because he did help the state, like he did a plea to kind of get Newkirk indicted for the kidnapping. But so he's out on parole, guys. He quickly gets caught, and back in trouble by stalking his ex-wife. Yes. So now in 2011, he decides to tell the police that he knows where the CFO was buried that went missing in 2008. So this is what he comes up with. So Bronner tells a story to the Faulkner County Sheriff's where he's being held before his trial. So he says that he was blackmailed by some thugs he owed money to if he went and helped them dump Glasgow's body along the Lonoke County and Pulaski County line near a bean field, and this is near England, Arkansas. The authorities, they polygraphed Bronner. Evidently, he passed the polygraph. Another example of why polygraphs don't work. They expend a lot of money, time, and efforts. They actually take Bronner, on these, adventures to try to find John Glasgow, and nothing turns up. They dig, they use cadaver dogs, they do everything that they can to find John. So the authorities, after all of this, decide Bronner just, is trying to get a lighter sentence and just pulling these shenanigans to try to get a lighter sentence because he's up, he's had a parole violation or whatever. He does end up going to trial, and he ends up getting a 10-year sentence for the stalking part and an added 96 months for violating his parole. And a little side note, I did look up Bronner because I'm like, is this dude out? He is still incarcerated. He's in the Pine Bluff unit. His sentence began, it says, in 2014, but it also lists a date of 2009, but that would have been like his first initial situation. So it's listed as an 18-year sentence. However, not sure if his time, at what point does that 18 years start. So he's either going to be out in 2028 or 2032. Big question mark. But right now he is incarcerated down there with the dirty dealer. So the poor Glasgow family, to hear, after 4 years of nothing, to have just these hopes dashed when they thought that this was a legit lead, and it turns out to just be, this crazy person he's just always, I don't know, he's always working and not in a good way. So many more years do pass, unfortunately, but big news does come for the Glasgow family eventually. So March 11th, 2015, 2 young college students, one named Marshall, who attended the Arkansas Tech University, which is located in Russellville. We dove into that whole thing in the Nona Dirksmeyer episode, so go listen to that. Another young man was with him named Lance. He was a student at the University of Arkansas. So they decide to skip classes. This is on a Wednesday, the 11th. So they decide to skip their classes and go hiking at Petit Jean State Park. Like, neither boy had ever hiked there before. And after they kind of hit the hiking trails, they decided they were bored and wanted to just hike off trail. And this, again, is something, most parks, they don't want hikers going off the trail. There's always signs about stuff for safety purposes. The area was very remote and rugged terrain. But after a little while of the boys going through the woods, they come upon a partial skull. And at first they're looking at this, and I'm sure it's like, how your mind is. It doesn't want to see, like, is that a rock? Is that what am I looking at? And at first they could not believe what they were seeing, but they did, get closer and they could actually see a tooth in the skull. So they were like, this is a human skull. So Marshall, not knowing what to do, and I thought this was so cute because if these were adult, I mean, not to say these boys aren't adults, they're college students, but I can see my L. I mean, you can see your young daughters, sons, they're going to call you. So Marshall calls his mom because he doesn't know what to do. And his mom advises them on how important a fine this is and that they need to call the authorities. So they do. So luckily, call your mom. Like, if in doubt, I'm always like, Elle, if in doubt, call me. Like, call me or your dad. Like, if you don't know what to do, like, call us. So, because I get that. Like, you don't know what to do. So, the skull was immediately sent to the state crime lab, and by the following day, so by the 12th, dental records were used to confirm the skull belonged to John Glasgow. This skull fragment lay 1 mile from where John's car was in 2008. And I will try to post, like, there is like kind of a map and with pictures with this episode, I will try to post that so you can kind of see like how close this was. And this is kind of, and to go back a little bit, so I researched a lot of things, but one of the items that I did watch, there was a disappeared episode, which is by the, all my show notes will have all the things. And definitely, I like to watch the disappeared. There's tons of them. But there was a disappeared episode from 2010. So it was 2 years after John was missing, but obviously 5 years before he was found. And it's interviewing everybody. In fact, Melinda's on it, Roger, there is a sheriff with the Conway County, and then it's that tracker that was just the amazing tracker, and they were like, he's not here. They were so 100% sure that they looked everywhere in that park, and in 2010 they state John was not there. So this is always amazing to me that, I guess in what I used to do, like there is no 100%, guys. There is no 100%. You cannot be sure of things. Things get missed. They just do. And his body was literally a mile from where his car was. And yes, the weather was bad. They had the dog, again, the dogs. I'm sorry, dogs pick up a lot of things. Like, their noses are crazy. Like, I can't even, their sense of smell is wild. The wind blows, and they probably have a scent from, 50 miles away. But anyway, they looked, and they did not find what was there. That is just the saddest thing to me, I guess. It's just, anywho. So, they find the skull, the police block off the area and continue to search for anything else, any more fragments or whatever. All they had is this partial skull. So 200 yards south of where the skull was found, they do find more bone fragments of John's body. They find his wallet. It had his driver's license in it and his personal credit card. They also found his clothing, which does match up with clothing that Melinda knew that he wore, okay? So they find all of this. And I do have tons of questions on that. But anyway, so John's family literally hold a press conference that afternoon. So Thursday afternoon, they find out, they're releasing that, yes, this is John. And Roger states the family felt relief, but also a terrible sense of sadness, and that they desired for there to be a thorough investigation. And that would be any family's wish. Roger did state at that time to press he felt that John's death was caused by foul play. So it is, 7 years later, and the family still feels what they feel, and I feel what they feel. It would be another month before the medical examiners would actually release anything, and the cause and manner of death was undetermined. And according to reports, there was no trauma to the skull, so nothing to indicate a gunshot wound or a fall for that matter. And obviously, his remains were 7 years old, and his bones had been obviously scattered, by animals. That's going to happen in the elements. And of course, you have the elements. So, unfortunately, that did not answer any of the questions that the Glasgow family would have. Definitely not great. So the Conway County Sheriff's Office, they state that the case of John as a missing person is closed. They've found him, that is closed. However, because of the cause of death is undetermined, the case would be open. I would think at the state police level for sure. Now, the sheriff's office stated if any additional leads or information came about, they would definitely investigate those. So with the body comes some closure to the Glasgow family. Some, they know for sure John was in the park, like not just his car, but his body. So, it still leaves, and also they know that he didn't run off to start a new life, which is something that they didn't believe, or that he was abducted from the park. So at least they know he was in the park. But this still leaves obviously huge questions. So if John didn't die of a gunshot wound or a fall, how did John die? Like, if you dive into online Reddit conversations, which I did, the fingers and the rumors, the fingers pointed and the rumors, wow. So those people in the Reddits, they go straight to the fact that they feel definitely that this was all related to the CDI Dillard's buy-in and the audit. Now, some of them point the fingers at it must be John's fault. He did something wrong, so thus he was scared and he left. Now, other people, these deeply conspiratorial angle people, say that it must be related to the Clintons, because if you're in Arkansas, everything goes back to the Clintons, evidently, but because of CDI's involvement in building the presidential library, people point the finger at that. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a conspiratorial angles person like that. I do believe that, I don't know. I'll put it this way. Did Oswald kill Kennedy? Yes, he did. Now, I do also think he mentions that he's a patsy. I do think there's more to his story, but did he kill Kennedy? Yes, he did. So, now, I'll just say this. I don't have faith, and the reason why I don't look at conspiratory situations or conspiracy theories or put much faith in them is because I really don't have faith that people can keep big secrets. Like, people go on peopling and we talk and we do things. I just don't think we're capable of many conspiracy things. I just don't think we're good at that. So I also, however, on the flip side, I don't believe in coincidences. So for sure, we know that John was upset. We know John was upset. We know he was stressed about work. We know that the audit and this buyout were taxing, and we know that James Freeman was stressing him out and questioning his integrity, and he was not a fan of him, and Freeman wasn't a fan of CDI. And, Freeman felt that CDI was, doing, wrong to Dillard's and vice versa. So there was big beef between these companies and these CFOs. That is evident. And obviously, whatever happened to John, that is related. That is all related to it. Now, why did John go to bed at 10:30 fine on Sunday And then by 5:15, like he's out the door and headed to Petit Jean State Park. That is my question, which does not make sense. I see, in my opinion, and based on everything that I've looked into on John, John was an honest person. Like he was honest. He procured his position by being honest and finding defraud ahead of him. He was, honest in his personal finances. There was nothing out of line. There was nothing extravagant. He wasn't stealing. He wasn't moving anything around. They did not find any of that. He owed nothing to his vehicles, his home, whatever. Like he was living nice but modestly, especially for someone in his position. He was extremely close to his wife. And I just don't think he would have just okay, he would have left. So, I mean, for me, and again, I've gone down this route. I know so many people like John. So many of these type A people. And I think about, and I, on one respect, am very like that too. Like I was talking to Daryl about this case and I'm like, Daryl, if this was me, and I know women are we're just built different from men. Like this wouldn't be me. But if it was, I would leave you instructions on everything to do in my ad. So let's just say if I really felt like John went to take his life, I really have problems with that because he did not leave specific instructions. And I really feel like a type A personality does. We just do. It's do it like this and do it this way. And he would have left a lot more for Melinda than some weird numbers on her pad that she already knows. So I just don't think that was the case. I just don't believe it. So I personally believe, I really felt from the very beginning that John went that morning to meet someone. I really feel like he was being coerced. He felt threatened. He was fearful of his situation. I don't think it was because of something he did. I think it was just the position that he was in. But it feels like he went to meet someone. Why? Who is the big question? Who is the big question? And that, unfortunately, we won't know what truly happened to John that day. I do have a lot of faith, and in my faith, I feel like we do find out answers, Lord willing, on the other side of this life on earth. And I do have faith that people or persons responsible, and I'm not saying that necessarily someone was physically responsible, that someone definitely was responsible for making John feel the way he felt. I'll put it that way. But I do feel like these people face judgment, whether having a terrible existence on this earth or after. We do face our judgments. We face what we do. So I do believe that. So I think that definitely poor John was in a bad situation, or at least made to feel like his situation was beyond hope still. And in a quick amount of time, we're talking 10:30 Sunday night to 5:15 Monday morning, something happened. What was that something? That's the big kicker. So, I have, me, I did reach out to the Arkansas State Police to get a copy of the file because, it's undetermined. I don't know if they have a file or if I can get anything. So I will say, because I had a lot of questions, did they find any DNA materials on his clothing? I mean, they have the clothing, and I understand that it's elements of 7 years, but, was there blood? Were there hairs? Were there other things on his clothing? What was done to analyze his clothing? And especially in the wake of so many advances in DNA. And then also, it mentioned about his partial skull not being, not having any trauma or whatever. Well, what about, any of his other bones? And of course, it sounded like this was just a scattering of bones, maybe not full skeleton. So there are a lot of questions that I have about that. And so anyway, if I get a copy, if there is a copy to be gotten, from the Arkansas State Police, which they are my friends and I love them. Shout out to them. So I will do a follow-up episode or something on that, just FYI, if there's anything that develops from that. So I do urge anyone with any type of knowledge, small or great, to call the Arkansas State Police at 501-618-8420. If it's one of those, if you heard something, say something deals, this happened 17 years ago, any information, legitimate information, and not from a person named Bronner that, gets involved with trying to abduct people and get money sent to offshore accounts. Anywho, if you have legitimate information, all that information would help a family who lost so much. So, that is the end of this very sad, unexplained episode. Please leave me a comment, connect with me on all the socials. You can email me. All of our communication and links are in the show notes. And please leave a 5-star rating, share and like, and just all the stuff. And love you guys. Thank you for listening. Hug your families. Bye.
So they decided to go to race the spot market project. This like okay, very certainly they're blowing at the
Unexplained Arkansas.